Welcome to Fear and Greed Sunday Feature. I'm Michael Thompson. We love a good entrepreneur story on this podcast, and this one fits very neatly into that category. Back in June of 2021, Sean Aylmer spoke to Tim Fung, the co-founder and CEO of Airtasker. This conversation took place not long after Airtasker listed on the ASX. Now, the company, which you'll hear more about in a moment, is based around odd jobs, essentially finding and paying strangers to do all those little things that you either can't do or won't do yourself. The share price has come off a lot since this conversation. Back then, it was around $1.20. Now it's under 40 cents. But it is still a fascinating story of coming up with an idea, building a business out of it, and taking that all the way through to an IPO and beyond. It is a great chat. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. One of the most exciting IPOs this year was the listing of gig economy platform Airtasker. It was founded back in 2012 as a way to connect people who had odd jobs with those who could do them for a negotiated rate, everything from assembling IKEA furniture to babysitting. Since then, it's grown significantly, acquiring competitors and culminating in the listing on the ASX in March. The issue price was 65 cents, but by the end of the second day, shares in Airtasker closed up 170%. They've settled back a bit now, but are still well above the issue price, and an incredible ride and opening up opportunities now for major marketing campaigns and expansion. Tim Fung is the co-founder and CEO of Airtasker and my guest today. Tim, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me.
So tell me the Airtasker story.
Well, as I mentioned, back in 2011, we came up with the idea for Airtasker. So it's been almost a 10-year journey. And it all started when I was moving apartments. And I asked a friend of mine, Ivan, to help me, pack all my boxes and move them. He has a truck which he uses to do deliveries for his frozen chicken nuggets business. And so we packed everything in his truck, moved it across to my apartment. And then that just got us thinking is, why do we ask friends and family to do all these kinds of jobs when there's so many people out there who are looking for a way to be able to earn some additional income? And what we realized is there just isn't really a fit-for-purpose way to do local services. And we thought this is kind of crazy because if you look at platforms like Amazon and Alibaba and Kogan that are making buying physical products so easy, yet take a look at services and it's still, ask a friend, put it on a classifieds. We thought, there's got to be a simple way to do e-commerce for local services.
Great idea, and it's a great story. At what point did you think, actually, we're onto something here?
It was a hard slog for quite a number of years, actually. And the reason for that is that the way Airtasker is built is it's truly a community marketplace. We describe ourselves as being open and horizontal, which means that the way that we build trust on Airtasker is through transparency and accountability rather than doing the jobs ourselves. And the types of work that can be done through Airtasker is really infinite. You can get anything done on Airtasker within our community guidelines. But what this means is you do have this chicken and egg problem when you start, which is, who comes first, the people who want to do the work or the people looking for someone to do the work. And it takes a long time to do that. And, we tried a lot of things, failed at a lot of things. And, it took us quite a few years to get up and running.
Okay, so how does Airtasker make its money?
We find this really, really important what our business model is. And that is that we don't do advertising and we don't charge subscription fees or anything like that. We align ourselves completely with our customers and our taskers by only charging a percentage of the completed task value when the job is completed to the satisfaction of both parties. And this is really important because it means that, taskers, the people who do the work on Airtasker, don't have to pay anything up front, and they simply just get, only when they receive income into their bank account does Airtasker earn anything. And the same thing for customers. We charge nothing unless you get the job done.
Okay, so let's take a real life example. I need a babysitter on Saturday night. I have 2 kids and they're 5 and 7, and I'm going to be out from 7 till 12, and so it costs $120 for argument's sake. So I go on airtasker.com.au. I look for a babysitter. There's someone in the area. It's going to cost me $120. I pay the babysitter $120, and then a percent of that goes to Airtasker. Is that right?
That's right. So there's a small fee which is applied on both sides of the market. So if the job value is $120, the customer will pay a slight booking fee on top of that, and the tasker will pay a percentage of that. All in all, a percentage of the amount that you pay through to Airtasker goes to Airtasker, and that is about 17% of the task value.
Okay, so what is typically the amount of money that is being paid for a task, and what are the typical tasks?
Such a great question. So one of the things that we've been seeing is the types of work going through Airtasker are evolving over time. So as you mentioned, when we started, we were all about, odd jobs and errands. And primarily people would use Airtasker for, packing some boxes or doing some light gardening work. But actually over time, the types of jobs have evolved so that now we have tax accountants, lawyers, architects, surveyors, all these other kind of work is coming. And as a result of that, the average task price on Airtasker has been increasing. Where it stands today, it's around $194 is the average
Right.
task value.
Okay, and it's tax time coming up. So if I want an accountant, I go to Airtasker potentially.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we're an infinitely horizontal marketplace. So it's one of those things where anything that you need done, as long as it fits within our community guidelines, and so there are some
Yep.
things that, we certainly protect the community from. But in terms of whether it's anything from packing boxes through to professional trades, plumbers and electricians, all the way to accountants and lawyers, that's all available on Airtasker.
So do you rate people? Or how do I know I'm getting someone okay?
It's a great question, and I think it depends on the different kinds of jobs that you're doing. So you mentioned there, for example, babysitting. So if I was choosing a babysitter on Airtasker, I would look for a verified working with children's check, which Airtasker displays on the profile of the tasker. I might also look for a police check badge on that person's profile. I'd then also be looking at the ratings and reviews that that person has earned on previous jobs. And,
Yep.
that can be anything from 1 to 10 reviews all the way up to some of our taskers, which have thousands and thousands of reviews for the services that they've done before.
Fantastic. Now, look, you've created partnerships with companies like IKEA, where shoppers can book to put together those infinitely difficult cupboards and tables and chairs, many of which I've done myself. How important is that sort of partnership to get Airtasker where it is today?
Well, it's very interesting because in the early days of Airtasker, we had a very small marketplace. And so when we would go and speak to people like IKEA, there'd be less interest from them because our base of active taskers was smaller. But as Airtasker's really grown and grown and grown over the years, we've built up this national workforce of tens of thousands of active workers every month. And so that makes it easier. You want to go and partner with someone like IKEA, they see that as incredibly valuable. And so that
Yeah.
has gotten easier over time, but I can tell you it was very hard in the early years.
Okay, and everyone's a contractor. So I'm coming at you from the idea of the Deliveroo decision recently, where it was the Fair Work Commission that ruled the food delivery rider was an employee, not a contractor, and shouldn't have been dismissed. Now, does that decision affect you, and are you confident everyone remains a contractor?
Well, I think this is a really interesting area, which is this idea of the umbrella term of the gig economy. And one thing that Airtasker, we like to emphasize and stress about our business model, the differences in the different kinds of platforms that exist underneath that umbrella. And, when you think of something like the food delivery platforms or the ride sharing platforms, what's common about them is that it's the platform that is deciding who's going to do what job. And it's the platform that decides the price and what kind of work that you're going to do. Airtasker is completely different to that, which is that it is the tasker, the service provider, and the customer who independently between those two people agree on what is the job to be done. And also it's the tasker who determines what is the price that they need to be paid to do that job.
Yeah.
That's not determined by Airtasker. That's entirely driven by the community. So it's quite a different model.
Yeah, very significant difference there.
That's right. And so I think we do believe that in some of these spaces where the platform is deciding who's doing what and what they're going to get paid for doing that, regulation is absolutely something that should be a consideration. But in a community marketplace, it's actually more similar to something like the Yellow Pages or Google or Gumtree. So
Yep.
it's a slightly different scenario there.
Stay with me, Tim. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Tim Fung, co-founder and CEO of Airtasker. Now, I'm trying not to talk about COVID-19 anymore. However, it must have had a real impact on your business, even in terms of the jobs that people needed being done.
In the early days of COVID, we saw an initial depression in the marketplace. And, we were pretty concerned as a business as we watched the numbers drop. And they dropped by about 14% month on month, which is a pretty large number for us at the scale that we've grown to. But what we saw was quite remarkable out of that scenario, which is that we started to see that customers were just started requesting different things on Airtasker. For example, they started requesting shopping deliveries. They started requesting at-home personal fitness trainers. Bike repairs increased about 160% week on week. And so what we saw is the mix of jobs start to change on the platform. And then at the same time, our taskers started getting really creative with the way that they were going to deliver those services. So, for example, we have some of our top taskers do things like home organization. And I would have thought that that's an in-person job, but actually they were able to start doing that remotely. And as a result of that, 2020 was actually the largest year of point-to-point growth for Airtasker.
Wow.
And it was something where we really saw our community show their resilience and how they could adapt to the situation, which was, a great signal for our business model.
So 2020 was strong. Was a good time to list then in March this year. So I suppose, why did you list? What was the reason for that, and how have you found it?
There were two primary reasons why we decided to list. So I think one is that we see the opportunity for Airtasker, particularly in international expansion, to be absolutely ginormous. If you look at the US markets and the UK markets, Singapore, Ireland, and New Zealand where we operate, there isn't anything like Airtasker in those markets. And so it's really a blue ocean opportunity, and it will require some upfront capital investment. So to be able to, have the agility of being able to access the, ASX investors was definitely a very appealing point for us. The second is that it gave an opportunity for our employees and our taskers to be rewarded and to own part of Airtasker. And we thought that was really, really cool. When we listed the company, we actually created a special offer for our taskers, our most foundational and early taskers. And the response was absolutely massive. It ended up actually getting leaked onto a Reddit forum, and we opened up our bank account the next day. There were millions of dollars in this bank account. So we had to actually do a confirmation back check against whether they were all actually taskers on the Airtasker platform.
Wow.
And actually return millions of dollars to people's bank accounts. So it was a great response, and it was great to have taskers being part of the journey with us.
Okay. And did you look at the share price? I mean, you had a huge jump in those first couple of days and then it came back, but it's been fairly flat since, the last couple of months, really. It's fairly flat, being about $1.10 or $1.20 or so, which is not that far off twice what you listed at. Are you happy with how it's gone so far?
I think it's fair to say that if you watch the share price every day, you're going to probably start pulling your hair out.
Yep.
And you've got to really focus on the long term of the business. I mean, from my perspective, I'm here for the long term. And so I certainly don't sort of look at the share price every day. And I certainly don't want to react to that, or any of my employees or team members to react to the share price. But certainly, point to point, if we look at where we started in March to where we are now, being almost, 70% up on the listing price, massively exceeds any of the expectations that we had before we listed.
There are plenty of other IPOs in the last 6 months who would be extremely happy with that result. Tim?
Absolutely. And, I think as much as you have to, we're founders and entrepreneurs and we want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. At the same time, I think it's important to smell the roses and count a bit of success and recognize those milestones.
So the future is all about international expansion?
I think there's two main areas which we are focusing on at the moment. One is that we are building new ways for customers to be able to connect with taskers. So, for example, we've just launched a new marketplace model called Airtasker Listings. But what this does is allows taskers to pre-package services and put them on the shelves of the Airtasker store so that we can inspire our customers about what else they could use Airtasker for. So, for example, if you want to have a comedian come and perform at your birthday party, you can now book that on Airtasker Listings. So, opening up whole new services categories. So that's one area, is the marketplace models. The second is international expansion. As you may have seen in the news, we recently acquired a company called Zali in the US, which we're really, really excited about. And that's going to give us that massive jump start into the US market, which is just an absolutely enormous blue ocean for us.
Yeah, very exciting. Now, if I go and buy IKEA the Savo, Tim, would you be able to come over and put it together? Are you handy?
I don't mind doubling a little bit, but actually what I did experience on Airtasker is a very pertinent example. I was trying to put together about 15 of these stools with a hand screwdriver, and it was taking me about 10, 15 minutes per stool. I had about
very sore wrist as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But I had a tasker come over and put them all together in about 1 hour with a a drill and a much better process than me. And I just realized, wow, this is, the value of being able to connect people with skills in their local community.
You know that story there, Tim, you don't own a drill, therefore you're not handy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to put that to you so bluntly, but if you don't own a drill, you're in trouble. Tim, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks so much, Sean.
That was Tim Fung, co-founder and CEO of Airtasker. This is a Fear and Greed daily interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.